So today I'm attempting a 10-minute speed stamping challenge inspired by tulips and bold florals. And clean and simple, fast card making is definitely not my natural comfort zone. I'm starting completely from scratch. Even the card base is part of the timer. So let's start the stopwatch and see if I can actually finish before the 10 minutes is up. I did have a pre-made card base sitting on my desk, but I debated whether starting with that was kind of cheating for a speed challenge. So here we are, making everything from scratch under the timer. And while I'm doing this, I also just wanted to say a really big thank you because this channel quietly passed the 500 subscribers yesterday, which honestly caught me by surprise in the very best way. There are quite a few new faces here, so if you're new, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here. For this card, I'm playing along with the speed stamping challenge over at As You See It challenge blog, which is all about tulips and bold florals. I chose a flower from the beautiful Promenade stamp set. It's not technically a tulip, I don't think, but to me it has that same soft, open floral shape, so I felt like it was the perfect fit. I wanted a soft, layered look without overcomplicating things, so I'm using a stamping off technique. I ink the stamp it off on scrap paper first, and then bring it to the card front. That gives me a lighter impression and a bit of variation in the colour. I did this a few times, then I'm layering in the second stamp from that set, the striped inner floral detail, using Blushing Bride ink to give a softer pink tone. This is where I'm trying to stay quick and not overthink it. This stamp has a really lovely striped style that adds texture without feeling too busy. I continued using the stamping off technique here, which helped create subtle colour variation and depth across the design and kept the overall card feeling light and airy. At this point, I started to pull some patterned paper from my stash. I was keeping an eye out specifically for striped pieces with a little pink in them that could help me guide the rest of my color palette. I found this striped piece and it blends those pinks, some crumb cake neutral tones, and a touch of blue and yellow, and it ended up tying everything together really nicely. It was time to add a sentiment, and I found this really pretty one from an artfully layered stamp set I had in my collection. And I know that speed stamping means looking for a color that's going to be really good with just a simply stamped black or dark toned sentiment. I really liked those touches of blue, and I had a couple of options from my scrap bucket. And originally I thought maybe the darker Marina Mist might be really cute, but when I stamped it, I found that the black just didn't stand out enough against it. So I opted for the softer blue tone instead. I got to this point, the 6-minute mark, and I was feeling really good about where this was going. I could have left it here, just glued those pieces down and called it done and been really happy, but I knew I had 4 minutes and decided to push my luck and add one extra detail. I have this neutral thread in my collection that goes really well with those crumb cake tones that are in the striped panel, and so I thought it would be fun to add that on. Because it's a flat single layered card, my usual tucking of the ribbon in behind a layer wasn't going to work, so I had to quickly find some tools that would allow me to have that little bit of notched detail in the edges for the ribbon to sit in. You can absolutely wrap the ribbon without this detail, but I have found in the past that the tension of the ribbon can sometimes cut into the cardstock later as you're tying the bow off, and I didn't want that. At this point, I'm really aware of the clock because I didn't pre-plan this step properly, and I knew roughly what I wanted, but I didn't set up for it for speed. Let's just say tying a bow under pressure was a really interesting experience. And somehow I actually managed to hit stop on the stopwatch with just seconds until the 10-minute mark. I was honestly really pleased with that finish. It felt like a proper race to the end, and I love how this little card came together. So with the pressure off and everything still out on my desk, I couldn't resist making a second version. This one uses the same supplies, the same stamps, inks, patterned paper and ribbon, but I've stepped it up into a more layered design inspired by the Sunday Stamps Sketch Challenge this week. For the stamped focal panel on this project, I kept the floral stamping much simpler than the original card. Instead of creating an all-over stamped background, I used just 2 flowers, one full-strength stamped image and one stamped off for a softer contrast. This helped create a cleaner focal point while still keeping that soft layered effect that I loved from the first card. I was pretty rapt to find this pink patterned paper in my collection. It was an old paper that was originally a full 12 by 12 with this gorgeous decorative edging, and I've positioned my stamped panel here so I can take advantage of the pink part of that edging in my project. I've cut some saffron leaves with a die cut just to mix in some of those lovely yellows from the striped paper. And the sketch challenge that I'm following has a skinnier sentiment, so I went with something slightly different but used those same techniques, the black ink simply stamped on the soft blue to stand out. As I was looking at my focal stamped piece, I decided to add a little bit more texture and stamp in some crumb cake leaves. This just helps tie that neutral tone back through the piece. And having done that, I thought changing the background card up to a neutral card base was a good idea too. So I've got a crumb cake base for this particular project. I have a big stack of embellishments in my collection and I wanted to add a few little shiny touches. So there's a couple of sequins here that match in with those yellows, and I found this really cute little blue dot and I've added that on as well. It's always interesting to see how much a design can change just by adjusting the layout and adding a few extra layers. I'd love to know which version you'd naturally gravitate toward, the fast and simple approach or the more layered style once the pressure is off. At this point I thought I was done, and then I was looking at it and realized I hadn't blended in any of that softer color, that blushing bride, into the background. So I got a sponge dauber and used a bit of a sponging technique to bring that tone through. As I was doing that though, I ended up damaging my sentiment panel and I had to go back and recreate it. You can see I've just left a bit of that color has transferred from the sponge dauber. I've had to do a quick fix. And now I'm happy with it. Thank you so much for spending some crafty time with me today and for all the lovely support and comments lately. It really does mean a lot, especially with so many new faces here. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and say hello. I love hearing what you're working on too. And until next time, happy crafting!